Hello and welcome back to the VATESOL blog. This month we are bringing you content all about advocacy. This informational video is all about the Virginia General Assembly. The Virginia General Assembly is a bicameral body, just like the U.S. Congress. It is composed of a Senate, which has 40 members, and they serve 4-year terms. Each senator represents about 200,000 Virginians. And there is a House of Delegates. It has 100 members. Each member serves 2-year terms, and each delegate represents about 80,000 Virginians. Who is your legislator? You can visit this website and put in your home address to identify your delegate and your senator. And that address is who'smyvirginiageneralassembly.gov. This is a graphic of how a bill becomes a law in Virginia. I did not create this graphic. It is from the Office of State Governmental Relations at the University of Virginia. It looks a little bit overwhelming at first. I chose this graphic because it does a really nice job of mirroring the language that they use at the Virginia General Assembly website. So when you're tracking a bill and you have a bill number, it will give you updates about where that bill is in the legislative process. And sometimes it'll say things like third reading or second reading, not engrossed. And I remember when I first started tracking the bills, those terms were really confusing to me. And so I thought this graphic just does a really nice job of kind of explaining the process and laying it out visually. So you can screenshot this. You can come back to this video later if you are in the 2021 session tracking a particular bill. You can come back here and look at this flow chart, and it might help you get some understanding for where that bill is. So we're going to walk through just a little bit of this, not every single scenario, but just kind of take an overview. And we'll start over here with the idea. So every piece of legislation that goes through either the Senate or the House of Delegates starts with an idea from a constituent or etc. And that's really where you come in. That's where we come in as an organization. If you have an idea that you think would benefit your students or benefit your organization, a population that you serve, then you can absolutely call your senator or call your delegate and give them the information that you have. You're going to definitely need to do your research and have everything prepared and come with ideas, but you can absolutely call them up and share those thoughts with them. They may choose to draft a bill, in which case they would introduce it and it would get referred to a committee. So in each legislative body, both the Senate and the House of Delegates, there are different committees that are that serve different topics or subjects. So in the Senate, you will find the Education and Health Committee, which is where most of the bills that we're interested in would end up. And in the House of Delegates, it would most likely be in the Education Committee. So that particular bill is referred to a committee, and sometimes it does die there in committee. It doesn't make it out. It doesn't survive. Otherwise, it gets reported from the committee. It's read once. It's read twice. And after the second reading, then it's either engrossed or engrossment is refused. So then the committee would read it out to the House of Origin, which just means wherever the bill started, either in the Senate or in the House of Delegates, and it is at that point voted on. So sometimes the bill will go through committee or a subcommittee, and then it can be defeated by its own House of Origin. Or sometimes, if they're successful, it is passed by the House of Origin, the first house, and at that point, right here, it has to cross over. it has to be communicated to the other legislative body, which means if a bill starts in the Senate, then and it is passed, it has to then cross over to the House of Delegates to go through the same process. It has to go through committee, be read once, twice, and a third time. If it starts in the House of Delegates, then similarly, it would then go to the Senate. So it's just a crossover period. So all along here, it goes through a similar process, and you can see here that they can make amendments. So the opposite legislative body can take the work that the first legislative body did. So the House of Delegates could take the work that the Senate did on a particular bill, and they can approve it or they can amend it. Eventually, if all goes well, it will go to the governor over here. And best case scenario, it would get approved and signed by the governor right away, and it becomes a law. There are other scenarios, as you can see through here. It can get very messy when the governor either vetoes the bill or approves it with amendments, because if either of those options do happen, then the bill has to go back to the General Assembly and kind of get kicked around a little bit more. And there are a lot of different outcomes that can happen, as you can see through this flow chart. But the quickest route for a bill to become a law would be to get introduced, accepted by its House of Origin, for it to cross over to the other legislative body, to then be approved by the second legislative body. It would then get sent to the governor. The governor, in the fastest way possible, could approve the bill, and then it would become a law. Of course, that does not always happen. There are easily over 1,000 pieces of legislation that get introduced every session for the Virginia General Assembly to consider. And of course, there are lots of committee meetings, lots of discussion about particular details within these bills, how those bills would affect the budget that has either been approved or the budget that is going to be proposed for the next year. And so there's a lot of work that goes on to make sure that these bills become laws. So I'm going to clear these drawings here, exit out of that, and we're going to move on. So now that you've seen a little bit of how a bill becomes a law, I want to point out the importance of committees. So the Senate, as I said, only has 40 members. So they actually have an education and health committee that is combined into one. So here I've pointed out the Senate education subcommittees, which may make it easier for you to pinpoint bills of your interest that are of interest to your particular context. The chair of the entire committee is Luis Lucas of the 18th District. And within the Health and Education Committee, the two subcommittees that are related to education are higher education, which would deal with bills related to colleges and universities. And then there is the subcommittee for public education, which deals with the traditional pre-K through 12 public schools. So in higher education, the current chair is Mamie Locke of the 2nd District, and other members include Chapman Peterson, John Cosgrove, Benton Chaffin, and Gisela Hashmi. And in the Public Education Subcommittee, the chair is Gisela Hashmi of the 10th District, and other members include Janet Howell, Mamie Locke, and Siobhan Dunavant, and Mark Peak. So as you can see, there are some members that can sit on more than one committee or more than one subcommittee, and that is pretty common. You will see that sometimes committee members will change from year to year, and that could be because that seat was filled by a new person after the election, or they were, some new person was voted in, someone was voted out, or they elected to switch committees. In the House of Delegates, there is a committee just for education, and there are 3 subcommittees within the Education Committee. The chair of the Education Committee is Rosalind Tyler of the 75th District, and the vice chair is Elizabeth Guzman in the 31st District. So the first subcommittee is the Post-Secondary and Higher Education Subcommittee, and the chair is Mark Keem of the 35th District, and the other members are listed there. I will not put you through me reading all of these names over and over because there are so many. As you'll remember, there are 100 members of the House of Delegates. They have a lot larger membership, so they tend to have bigger committees as well. Then there is the Pre-K through 12 subcommittee. The chair is Lamont Bagby of the 74th District. And there is the Standards of Learning and Standards of Quality subcommittee. That chair is Schuyler Van Valkenburg of the 72nd District. Now, the Post-Secondary and Higher Education Subcommittee is very similar to the Senate Higher Education Committee, and the Pre-K through 12 Committee in the House of Delegates is similar to the Public Education Subcommittee in the Senate. So they are mirrors of each other. The Standards of Learning, of course, refers to the curriculum in Virginia, the content that we teach in PK through 12 in Virginia. And Standards of Quality has a lot to do with staffing regulations in public schools for local education agencies, and as well as budgets. So there are a set of rules, a set of standards that administrators and school board members and people who are in positions of leadership with local education agencies, that they have to follow these guidelines to be in accordance with the Code of Virginia. So, live streaming. During in-person terms, all sessions and committee meetings are scheduled and live streamed from this website. So if you find out that you are very interested in a bill that gets put through the Education Committee and then it gets referred to the subcommittee for higher education, you find out that that subcommittee meets on Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m., they will have a schedule up on this website, and they will have a live feed video of that meeting. Now, this, of course, is all before the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is what they normally would do. I am not sure what the 2021 legislative season will look like in terms of legislators meeting at the Capitol or meeting in person, or if they will meet virtually. We'll just have to stay tuned and see what happens. Looking forward to 2021 in the Virginia General Assembly, it does convene January 13th, 2021. And I would like to point out that Virginia runs on a biennial budget cycle. So in even numbered years like 2020, budgets are approved and funds are appropriated. And in odd numbered years, budgets are amended and a new budget is proposed. So at the end of 2021, usually in December, we would expect a new budget from the governor at that point. The budget for Virginia has its very own website down here at the bottom. So you can go to that link anytime, and it will give you all the details, all the particulars of the budget. And the Virginia budget even has its own Twitter account. So you can follow the Twitter account for the Virginia budget, and it will give you lots of details about the interworkings of the budget. This is the calendar for the 2021 Virginia General Assembly. So pre-filing for new pieces of legislation to be considered. That began Monday, July 20th, and the last day for them to be pre-filed is January the 12th, because January the 13th is the first day of the new session. So you can follow along this year with the 2021 Virginia General Assembly. Usually early on in January, I will come out with a list of bills that have been pre-filed or have been introduced that are of interest to English language teaching professionals that we try to track through the course of the General Assembly. It is not an exhaustive list, but we try to get the key pieces of legislation out and track it. And when that comes, you can absolutely call your senators, you can call your delegates and tell them to, or ask them to support those pieces of legislation. And you can give them information about your experience teaching in the field, because many times the legislators are not familiar with education in terms of being a teacher or being in the field. Even though many of them do have full-time jobs outside of being a legislator, that doesn't necessarily mean they've been an elementary school teacher or they've been a university professor. Sometimes maybe, sometimes not, or maybe haven't had experience from the interworkings of the education system, or had the experience, the endless experiences that we have had with our students. And so they should really look to us to be the content experts in that way. So it is part of our goal to reach out to them and give them the information they need to make informed decisions about these pieces of legislation. Lastly, I will leave you with my contact information. I am Jessica Klein, the Legislative and Advocacy Liaison for VATESOL. This is my email, and this is the VATESOL Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter account information. Thank you for listening.